Okay, can you hear me clearly at the back?
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to obviously thank you for coming to this very special occasion. But it is special in more ways than one. As a professional art critic and writer of art books, since, I hate to say it, since the late 1950s or thereabouts, I've seen a series of tremendous changes in the art world. But one of the most radical has been the way in which art has ceased to be contemporary art, the avant-garde and so on, has ceased to be purely a matter for Western Europe and the United States. That everywhere I go, and I am perhaps the person, dare I say it, who travels the most in the contemporary art world, everywhere I go I find another art world. One of the problems, however, of this multiplicity of art worlds is the problem of evaluation. That is, how do we find a series of measures which tell us what is good and what is less good. That is particularly difficult in what is called nowadays a postmodern situation. It's very hard to find anything resembling an objective correlative, something which tells you that artist A draws the body or draws buildings or has a better sense of perspective than artist B. You have, to some extent, to fly by the seat of your pants when you're making this kind of judgment. What does help, I think, paradoxically, is that the best artists, the artists with the most universal appeal, usually seem to be those who are rooted in some kind of long-established cultural tradition. And that is very much the case with JAMIL NAQSH's work, and one of the reasons why it interests me so much. Jamil, as an artist, wants to speak to everybody. That is, he wants to speak to Westerners, people who don't read Arabic, people who don't understand much about Islam, as clearly as he speaks to people who are firmly rooted in those traditions. I think he has helped in this, particularly and specifically in this exhibition, where pretty well everything except the painting behind me is based on Arabic calligraphy, by the fact that the word and the image, the picture, are fused together in Islamic art. The word Allah not only designates God, it actually is God. Arabic script is not pictorial in quite the sense that Chinese characters are, where each character is a little concise picture. But at the same time, in its rhythms and its shapes, it invites aesthetic appreciation of a kind that most Western scripts cannot possibly evoke, a more complex kind of reaction. One of the things which I think is interesting about the history of the successive avant-gardes which have existed in art since perhaps the very beginning of the 20th century, is that an avant-garde characteristically both seeks to communicate and at the same time, to some extent, resists direct communication. And that is something which also, as I understand it, exists in the tradition of Arabic scripts. That is, the great divisions of script both invite the reader to read and at the same time resist that reading, make you tease it out. I think Jamil has been remarkable in his ability to seize upon this aspect of Arabic writing. One of the things which has enabled him to do so is the tradition of the names of God. The pictures here, the ones I'm pointing at, are all variations of designations for the Almighty. They focus on different qualities which can be attributed to the Supreme Being. They're generally called just the 99 names of God, but as most people who encounter this tradition find out, there are more than 99 names. There are several different canonical lists, not just one. And these names can also be, by the devout, recited in sequence. And the recitation is a form of meditation which brings you closer to the Supreme Being. But what has happened here is something which I think is extremely fascinating, and that is, Jamil belongs to a generation of artists on the Indian subcontinent. He was born in Uttar Pradesh, migrated to Pakistan at the division of the subcontinent, and now lives as a recluse here in London, and has, of course, as many people from his background do, further connections in Dubai. He encountered as a very young man, when his vocation as an artist seized him, something which was entirely new, and that was, for the first time after World War II, illustrated books, and particularly colored illustrated books, had developed to the point where images became available throughout the world in a way which they hadn't been previously. Now, this happened not first of all in the Indian subcontinent, but actually in Latin America. But Latin American art is probably the first independent, non-European form of modernism. And when you look at Latin American art in comparison to what has happened since in other places, you see a number of interesting things. One is that the experience of modernism is compressed. For someone who lived through the European experience, there is a kind of regular rhythm that you have Fauvism, then you have Cubism, then you have Surrealism and so forth. And while there are side branches like Expressionism, there is a kind of structure of styles. Well, in other parts of the world, that didn't happen. And you've got what I used to tease my Latin American friends by calling the theory of buffet. Artists moving along saying, oh, Expressionism looked good, I'll put a bit of that on my plate. Oh, but that bit of Surrealism was very tasty too, so I'll put that on. So there is no rigid historical structure. Artists have always had to use the various traditions in a totally personal way. And this, I think, our friend JAMIL has been peculiarly adept at doing. All of these paintings are excellent examples of the use of largely European materials associated with the tradition of painting in the West. But at the same time, they show an intense knowledge of the past of art in Islam. That is, JAMIL studied not only Western painting, indeed an art college which was originally founded by the British, but he also had the opportunity to work with traditional masters, both of script and of the traditional Mughal ways of painting. Just as a side issue here, one of the things which is becoming particularly relevant here is that tradition is also starting to reverse itself. Yesterday I visited an exhibition organized by the Prince's Trust, and in the company of a friend of mine, Sam Toolan, who works for them, to find all these traditional techniques being explored here in Britain under the auspices of a trust funded by the Prince of Wales. The result has been, in the hands of certain important artists, a fusion of impulses, a fusion which leads us towards an even more universal form of art than we actually thought we possessed. JAMIL, sitting there, in a way rejecting the world, focusing entirely on his art, what he wishes to create, is nevertheless, paradoxically, an artist who reaches out to the whole world. And that is how he wishes to be seen. And that is why this exhibition, which is not in Pakistan, which is under the auspices of a very British gallery, is, I think, both a very important event in itself and a very striking tribute to what is happening in the art world, to the way the art world is changing before our very eyes. Thank you very much for coming.